Conformity, language and identity. In 1951, Solomon Asch conducted an experiment. His participants were filled with actors and non-actors. The goal for the participants was to match the length of the left line, with the length of one of the three right lines. However, there's a bit of a twist. Sometimes Solomon Asch instructed the actors to say the incorrect answer to see if the non-actors would follow along just to not stand out. This experiment had about a 50% success rate. 50% of the non-actors, conformed, while the other half kept their beliefs and stood up for what they believed in. So, what is conformity? It is an act of social groupness. It is the creation of social groupness. Why do people conform? It's the most comfortable thing to do. It's the easiest thing to do. It avoids having the situation of outliers. People conform because of the following ways of knowing from the theory of knowledge. Reason. This is mostly using logic, and is the opposite of emotion. Emotion. Pretty opposite from reason, and it's pretty impulsive. Faith is knowing without seeing, but still believing and knowing. Imagination, using some futuristic ideology. Intuition, knowing innately. There are some real-life examples of conformity regarding language and identity, just like Walton Goggins, the famous American actor. He changed his language and identity just so that he could get better film opportunities. Growing up in Lithia Springs, Georgia, his accent was very strong, and it held him mostly to Western film opportunities. He used reason and logic and some type of imagination to get himself to speak in a more standard dialect and have a better chance of starring in romantic films. Overall, it did work out for him. With different branches of Christianity, we can see that different practices are held, which means different songs or prayers, or even different times of verbal language is held, such as rosary. Rosaries often happen in a Catholic funeral. However, sometimes they are portrayed in a Protestant funeral just to conform to all of the family members. For instance, if half the family is Catholic and half the family is Protestant, you might see a Catholic rosary for someone who is actually Protestant. However, this does not just apply to any type of Christianity, it applies to any religion. With these different practices, we see conformity in language and identity because people are changing their beliefs for the moment or changing their actions and verbal language for the moment. We often see conformity regarding language and identity in politics. We see that Donald Trump in his 2016 campaign used imagination, reason, and some sort of emotion to change his language and dialect around the people he was trying to get along with in the campaign. I can't say that his dialect and language was perfect. I don't think anyone can, but I do think it changed a little bit after he was called out for some of his previous language in the previous years on television, such as locker room talk or non-standard dialect, which means informalities. A politician really has to have some type of standard dialect, cannot be substandard. If it wasn't, it'd be very awkward. Applause definitely applies to group identity. Once one person starts clapping in a crowd, it usually falls along and everyone starts clapping. This is a classic case of group identity and group conformity because no one wants to be left out or be seen as an outlier. Therefore, a lot of people use intuition, imagination, emotion, and reason. You might clap just because your body tells you to, because everybody else is. You might clap because you're really emotional and you want to be heard. You might clap just because you feel it's respectful and you use some type of reason. You might clap because you think ahead and say, I don't want these people looking at me to think I'm being disrespectful, so I better go ahead and clap now. So that is in regards to conformity in groups. So how does this relate to language and identity? All over the world, language and identity is changed to fit someone else's needs. Often dialects are changed, just like John Edwards' spectrum of A, B, C, and D. And people just want to understand each other. After all, that is the goal of language, to communicate effectively and to accommodate. And that is the idea of conformity. Actually, a synonym of conformity can be accommodation, or to accommodate. So overall, language and identity has a huge factor, or conformity has a huge factor on language and identity. We are not all 100% true because we change every day. Overall, social identity is more desired in a group. Conformity